the structure of the cell membrane. You know, cell membrane is one of the most important structure of any cell. Understand? So, to know the composition, structure of the cell membrane, here first we'll see the what is cell membrane made up of and all. Okay, the cell membrane is also called as plasma membrane, which envelops the cell and is a thin, pliable, elastic structure of 7.5 to 10 nanometers thickness. Okay, so here he is explaining about the elasticity nature and also the thickness of the cell membrane. Here thickness is 7.5 to 10 nanometers thick. It is very thin and pliable elastic structure in nature. Okay, so this is a neat bit. And cell membrane is also called as plasma membrane. Okay, here coming to the composition of the cell membrane, it is composed entirely of proteins and lipids. So you see the cell membrane is mainly made up of proteins and lipids. Understand? See, here you can see the structure of the cell membrane in a electron microscope. Okay, see here you seen the proteins and the cholesterol. These are nothing but the lipids and all. Okay, glycolipid, cholesterol. Okay, and these are proteins. This is the structure of microscopic structure of the cell membrane. So if you go in detail about this, protein composition approximates to 55% of the cell membrane, and lipids constitutes the remaining portion. So proteins parts the major part of the composition of the cell membrane. In lipids, again, it is classified into phospholipids constitute 25%, 13% is cholesterol, and 4% other lipids, and least is carbohydrates, which is just 3%. So here one more neat bit we can think about is the approximate composition of proteins is 55%. So they can ask the major composition of cell membrane is protein, which constitutes 55%. And the next composition is lipids. Okay, right. And this is also a unique bit. Its basic structure is a lipid bilayer. Bilayer means two layers. Okay, it's a lipid bilayer. This is also a neat bit. The basic lipid bilayer is composed of three main types of lipids. Okay, there what we say, it's a lipid bilayer. So in the lipid bilayer, what is the composition? If we discuss, they are mainly of three types of lipids. They are phospholipids, sphingolipids, and cholesterol. Out of these, phospholipids constitutes major part of the lipids. Okay, so here you see the phospholipids are the most abundant cell membrane lipids. As I say, the phospholipids are the most abundant cell membrane lipids. This is also one of the neat bit. Which lipids are most abundant of the cell membrane? They can give as sphingolipids, cholesterol, and phospholipids. And here we have to tick phospholipids as the major component. Okay, one end of the each. If now we go into structure of the phospholipid, you see each phospholipid in the diagram. You see this is one phospholipid. This is one phospholipid. This phospholipid has two ends. This is round structure. It is one end, and this leg-like structures. This is another end. So each phospholipid has two ends. One is round structure, which is hydrophilic head. And another one is this leg-like structure, tail-like structure. It is called hydrophobic tail. What is it? Hydrophobic tail. This hydrophilic head means it attracts water, and hydrophobic means it repels water. Okay, so like this in the cell membrane, phospholipids are arranged. This is one layer and this is one layer. So these two layers constitute a bilipid layer of cell membrane, which is called as cell membrane is a bilipid layer. See, phospholipids are most abundant of cell membrane lipids. One end of each phospholipid molecule is hydrophilic and soluble in water. The other end is hydrophobic and soluble only in fats. The phosphate end of the phospholipid is hydrophilic and the fatty acid portion is hydrophobic. So this end, why it is hydrophilic means because of presence of phosphate here, and here this end why it is hydrophobic is because of presence of fat. Okay, so this is the arrangement of phospholipids in the cell membrane. Understand? Yes. Now coming to the sphingolipids, derived from the amino alcohol sphingosine, also have hydrophobic and hydrophilic groups and are present in small amounts in the cell membranes, especially nerve cells. So the sphingolipids are mostly present in which type of cells? And the answer is nerve cells. Okay, and they do have both hydrophilic and hydrophobic contents. Strong complex sphingolipids in cell membrane are thought to serve several functions, including protection from harmful environmental factors, signal transmission, and adhesion sites for extracellular. So, coming to the function of these sphingolipids, they prevent the cell from harmful environmental factors, and they also helps in signal transmission because they're present in nerve cells mostly. Okay, and also helps for adhesion sites for extracellular proteins. Okay, this is about sphingolipids. Coming to the cholesterol molecules in membranes are also called as lipids because their steroid nuclei are highly fat soluble. Okay, they mainly help determine the degree of permeability or impermeability of the bilayer to water soluble constituents of body fluids. So here, what is the role of cholesterol? They mostly determine the permeability of the cell membrane, whether to impermeable or permeable to the water soluble body fluids. Okay, here cholesterol controls much of the fluidity of the fluid membrane of the cell. Okay, right. Now coming to the major component of the cell membrane, what we said is proteins. Here the proteins are also divided into two parts. One is integral and another one is peripheral proteins. See the arrangement of proteins in the cell membrane. See, here we see the blue color things are the proteins. This is the structure of the cell membrane. See, this is one phospholipid, this is one phospholipid. As there are two phospholipids, it is called bilipid layer. Understand? In the bilipid layer, here the proteins are arranged in two forms. One is integral protein, which extends throughout the bilayer of the membrane, and another one is the peripheral proteins, which are present outside the lipid layer attaching to the cell membrane. So here proteins are again divided into two, which are integral proteins and another one is peripheral proteins. Understand? See, there are two types of cell membrane proteins: integral proteins, which protrude all the way through the membrane, and peripheral proteins, which are attached only to the one surface of the membrane and do not penetrate all the way through. Many of the integral proteins provide structural channels or pores through which water molecules and water soluble substances, especially ions, can diffuse between extra and intracellular fluids. These proteins also have selective properties that allow preferential diffusion of some substances over the others. So coming to the functions of these proteins, these integral proteins, here you see it is acting as an channel for the entry of substances either from the cell to extracellular, from the cell to the intracellular. So here they provide a pore. This proteins acts like a pores for the transmission of substances within or without of the cell. Understand that the transmission can occur irrelevant to the diffusion gradient if it required. Understand? So those are the main functions of these integral proteins, and you know these are peripheral proteins. They can attach either to the one layer or to the another layer of the cell membrane, but they won't extend all the way across the cell membrane. So they are just called as the peripheral proteins. Other integral proteins act as a carrier proteins for transporting substances that otherwise could not penetrate the lipid bilayer. See here what I like to say, these integral proteins also act as a carrier proteins. So what is the carrier proteins? Carrier proteins are nothing but substances which cannot diffuse by themselves need a support. So these proteins will act as a carrier for the transmission from the extracellular to intracellular, either from the intracellular to the extracellular. So these integral proteins also act as a carriers for transporting of substances, okay, which you cannot penetrate the lipid bilayer by themselves. Sometimes the carrier proteins transport substances in the direction opposite to the electrochemical gradients for diffusion, which is called ectotransport. So here what is saying, sometimes these proteins also help for transport of molecules against their gradient. So diffusion occurs when there is high concentration to low concentration. Molecules from high concentration goes to the low concentration. But these integral proteins help for the diffusion from low concentration to high concentration also. That is against the electromagnetic gradient. So these are that is the type of transport, as you know, is called active transport. So the active transport is functioned here by these integral proteins. Coming to the peripheral proteins are often attached to integral, also often attached to integral proteins. These peripheral proteins function almost entirely as enzymes or as control of transport of substances through the cell membrane. See what they are saying, these peripheral proteins, they can often attach it to these integral proteins also. See, they act as an enzymes, it seems, and they also help in transport of substances. Understand? That is about peripheral protein. So these are the main structure of the cell membrane. Understand? The take home points are the cell membrane, called plasma membrane. It is 7.5 to 10 nanometers in thick. It is a lipid bilayer. Main composition is proteins, constitutes 55%, and other 45% composition is lipids. They constitute they again divided into three parts: phospholipids, sphingolipids, and cholesterol. And these phospholipids again present in two layers. So the cell membrane has got the name bilipid layer. It has two ends. One end is round and it is a hydrophilic end, and another tile-like, it is hydrophobic. Hydrophilic end is due to the presence of phosphate group. Hydrophobic end is due to the presence of fatty group in the tile. Understand? And coming to the proteins, two types of proteins: integral proteins and another is peripheral proteins. Integral proteins extend all the way in the bilayer of the lipid cell membrane, and it helps in transport of substances and water soluble substances and ions, and also helps in active transport of substances. Understand? And these are peripheral proteins, which are either attached to integral proteins or also attached to the cell membrane. They also helps in transport of molecules etc. So this is the basic electronic structure of the cell membrane. Okay, if you need any special topics, please message me down. Thank you for listening.